Alright, so I'll just leave a little silence here just to. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the ATRL Charts podcast. I'm Alexander. I'm here with Aaron. Unfortunately, Hair and Lego Fan Yoda, James, could not make it today, but we are here, and we're ready for another podcast. It is number 2, and hopefully it will be just as good, if not better, than number 1. We've got some kinks worked out in terms of the audio, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the new Billboard 200, which has been really messy in the sense that Nielsen has had to go back and edit the data multiple times, and I think people still aren't aware of the fact that streaming and album track sales are incorporated into the formula.
Right. Yeah, and they actually started that about last fall, actually, like right after the Thanksgiving holiday. It's basically when they're taking a tally of obviously the album sales, so the traditional album sales, plus the track sales, which are the sum of every track bought from that album divided by 10, plus every track that's streamed from that album divided by 1500. Now, the streams are only coming from subscription based services such as Spotify, Radio, Deezer, Tidal, and soon to be Apple Music whenever Nielsen begins to count those sales. But it does not include YouTube views. So I think people were having some issues or concerns about that. But those Billboard 200 figures do not include streams from YouTube.
Yeah, people were wondering whether they were going to include Apple Music streams right off the bat, but it appears they haven't so far because the numbers haven't corresponded. And they've had to go back and edit that chart after it was published. So a lot of people were wondering if they were going to move it to Mondays because currently they publish it on Sundays, which is one day before the Hot 100. And a lot of people think that if it was moved to Monday, then not only would it sync up with the Hot 100, it would give them more time to correct their mistakes. And I think that's a good idea. I don't know. I don't quite know why they're releasing it a day before.
Yeah, it was weird because normally they would release the Hot 100 and the Billboard 200 like all in the same day, like on the Wednesday, like 11 o'clock they'll do the Billboard 200, and then like around 1 to 2 o'clock, whenever they feel like it, they would post the Hot 100's top 10. So um, Keith Caulfield or Gary Truss, if you're listening, please take this suggestion and maybe do everything on Monday because it'll just make everything easier, and I guess give you guys enough time to, like Alex said, to correct your any type of errors that you guys may make. So just a small suggestion, which will help a lot of
Yeah,
people.
I think it's definitely the right idea. And I think that the one album that people have still talked about after all these months and still charting high on that chart is 1989. Bad Blood selling the album, really. Still at number 2 after all these weeks. Such a successful album.
And it's funny because a lot of people, including myself, I didn't think Bad Blood would sell the album so well, but we just have to realize Taylor is pretty much at her maximum right now. Like everything she's putting out, the public is eating up, and it's good for her. It's good for the people, and I am very very happy for Taylor, for the label, and just seeing everything that's developing. And to this day, as of this week, she has been in the top 10 on Billboard 200 since the album has been released. So that's almost going on 8 or 9 months now. And even if we look at the top album sales chart, which is just the pure album sales chart, she's been in the top 10 on that chart as well since the album has been released. So, even though she's being helped with the T, which is track equivalent albums on the Billboard 200, she's also been top 10 on the top album sales chart. So her domination on the Billboard 200 is just that even more impressive.
Yeah, everything clicking for her right now. She's bringing out a celebrity guest every night on tour. Fans are loving it. The critics, I must say they seem fairly impressed by it. Anyways, another artist that has had very good success on the charts lately is Fetty Wap. My Way was released digitally. went number one on iTunes, which I was surprised about. Went top 10 on the Hot 100 this week, which I was also surprised about. I wasn't expecting that for another few weeks. And he's really got that catchy melodic sound down to a T.
It's interesting, and I was I was just as surprised as you when it went number one because technically the song has been out for months. It's been on radio for a while. There's the original version, which includes rapper Monty, and then there's a remix that Drake actually remixed himself, which is also getting urban and rhythmic airplay. But normally, when you see these songs that are out, they normally don't sell as well when they're released to iTunes because people have already, you listen to it on YouTube or they've pirated it. But for him to actually top iTunes with a song that's been out for essentially for months now was very impressive. And I believe he has the second largest opening for a song of the year, right behind Selena Gomez and ASAP Rocky's "Good for You." I believe this song opened with 152,000 copies in its first week at retail. So that's, I mean, considering the sales climate, that's really, really good for him.
And another thing that I think is really impressive is that his song 679 featuring Remy Boys is getting unsolicited urban airplay. In fact, I think it's top 30 unpublished there, which, am I right? Let's see if I'm right. I'm not quite sure. Let me check. It's not. It's top 50. It's number 42. I was getting a little ambitious, but still, completely unsolicited. He's heading for his third hit on that format, and maybe the Natalie LaRose song will be a hit too. We'll talk about that later. But some really impressive success. Do you think My Way can cross over to pop radio?
This is an iffy one. I mean, it's if you listen to the lyrics, they're not that offensive, so maybe the lyrics can go over well on pop radio. Um, but I don't think it would hurt his label to send this song to pop. I think they should probably keep maybe 679 for urban and rhythmic, and then maybe try My Way for pop. And then obviously, if they want to release the Drake remix, which I think they should do because I think that song would garner so much attention. I think it has a really maybe strong chance of at least being a top 20 pop hit, just like Trap Queen was. So there's no hurt in actually trying it, but yeah, I think it may be able to peak in the top 20 on the pop chart.
Yeah, I think now that he's got more exposure, I think it's definitely got a better chance than Trap Queen did. Trap Queen, he kind of came out of nowhere, and pop radio, understandably, was a little bit hesitant to put it into power rotation, considering, some of the lyrics and considering the fact that he was unknown at the time, which, when I say at the time, I don't mean a long time ago. This was like 3-4 months ago. But now, with all this, he had 3 songs in the iTunes top 30 for a bit there. He's got 3 songs in top 20 on Spotify with 679 at number 4, Trap Queen number 6, My Way number 12. Like that's really good for him. It's almost as impressive personally for me. Actually, possibly more impressive than The Weeknd, because Fetty was a complete unknown outside of the very, very, the SoundCloud community, really. So very impressive for him.
Yeah, no, I agree because with the weekend he's had exposure before. Actually, with Drake, he was featured on I know Crew Love a couple years ago from his Take Care album, and then the weekend had his own releases with albums and singles, but they didn't really do as much damage as they could have. So I think with Fatty just coming completely out of nowhere, with this viral hit Trap Queen and selling, selling hundreds and hundreds of thousands of copies a week, for a rap song of that nature is like, wow, I'm very surprised that these type of songs are coming back to the top tier, the Hot 100. But I think we'll talk more about that later with like the difference in climates between then, like 2010 and 2015. So yeah.
hmm And just a little footnote that I'd like to mention is that following up from our segment about Lead On last podcast, um, turned out that Hare was right, that Nielsen messed up the streaming numbers clearly, because last week, not this week, last week, it jumped from 31 to 7 on the streaming songs chart, even as the YouTube views and Spotify streams remained steady, and it went top 10 because of that. So I do agree now that somehow the data was messed up.
Yeah, that's very odd. I don't know, like, I don't know if the streams are not picking up or registering, but I mean, I'm just glad to see it. It's actually in the Hot 100 top 10 now because I know that's a song that a lot of people on ATRL, especially in the chart section, have been rooting for. So it's nice to see that actually in the top 10. Hopefully, it can go further now that it's actually a top 10 seller on iTunes as well. But yeah, it's did did the people from Billboard actually get back with you regarding the data problem, or is it still up in the air?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that question is ever answered. Now, I think that Lean On will probably end up with the number 6 or number 7 peak because it'll start to decline on radio in a few weeks, and I don't see any reason that its streaming will go any higher, barring another missed collection of data. Um, but I think, it's definitely a breakout hit for an act like Major Lazer, who we'll talk about later when we talk about one hit wonders. But I think I'm not necessarily surprised that this became a top 10 hit, but I'm more interested in what they do from here, considering their music is generally not mainstream accessible. I know I'm generalizing, but a lot of their music is not mainstream accessible.
Right. No, that's absolutely right because a lot of these songs, especially with Lean On that we're hearing right now, normally these type of songs don't really smash in the US. They're more like worldwide hits like in the UK, Australia, but when it comes to US, a lot of it can be very up in the air. So and then that also has to do with radio. It depends on if radio wants to carry these types of songs. So again, you're right, it's not as mainstream or catchy in the sense that it's something that radio is normally like pop radio is normally used to playing. So yeah, I agree.
And the next thing that we're going to talk about, we mentioned it a little bit earlier. We're going to talk about the differences in the music climate from 5 years ago, 2010, versus now, 2015. I've dug out some radio updates, I've dug out some sales figures, um, and we're going to talk about them. And the first thing I'd like to mention is that, and the first thing that would be obvious to most people looking at the data that I looked at, is that the radio updates back then had far fewer spins for the top songs. You had the number one song getting anywhere between 11,000 to 12,000 spins, and you had most of the top 10 hanging a few thousand below that. Now, on published, you've got 17,000 for the number one, and on all stations, you got up to 20,000. So, why has this happened? Is it more songs in power rotation? Is it actually pop radio growing as an industry? Is it more syndicated programs across the country? What do you think?
I think it's a combination of all of those. Like, I think it's a combination of, we have more songs going into power rotation combined with the fact that there have been more stations added on as time goes on. So, for example, you may have had, I don't know, arbitrarily 90 to 100 pop stations back in 2009, 2010, whereas now you have close to 200 uh, pop radio stations. So that obviously plays a factor in the number of weekly spins that a song can obtain. And then, as you said, more songs may go into power rotation now. I think it may have to do with the fact that there are less commercials, which probably wouldn't make any sense because radio stations would want more money. But I think it's a combination, definitely, of the fact that there are more songs going into power, and that there are more stations on the panel in general. And I think the panel is probably just going to continue to expand as time goes on.
And speaking of radio differences between 2010 and now, HAC radio has gotten a lot more receptive in terms of the songs that it takes to the top of its charts. You've seen some very hip hop R&B influenced songs like "See You Again" do very well on HAC, which I don't think you could have predicted back in 2010. I think you've seen a lot of success on HAC from songs that you wouldn't have really thought would make a big impact on that format. Just looking at it right now, the HAC chart, um, a "See You Again" is number 3 there. It's peaked. It's going to peak at number 3. And "Can't Feel My Face" number 8. Granted, that's slightly pop leaning, but still. "Want to Want Me" number 7, and "Talking Body" 14 peaked at 8. I mean, these are all songs that I would personally be surprised to see be big hits on HAC in 2010.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And I think that has to do with the fact that I guess the people who are listening to HAC stations, which by the way stands for Hot Adult Contemporary, which is adult pop radio. I think the type of people who are listening to those stations are probably young adults, like the college crowd or the after post college crowd. Typically, when we think of Hot AC or HAC, it's more like traditionally we stereotype that older people are listening to those stations, like 40, 50-year-old people, which I mean they probably are, but I think as time goes on, like as noted by the current top 10 on that format, I think a lot of listeners are probably the young adults, like the 18 to 24-year-olds or 18 to 34-year-olds who would typically listen to normal mainstream pop radio. So I think that may have something to do with it as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the change in HSC radio. Um, and now we switch gears to the sales figures, which we obviously know have dipped dramatically. Songs in 2010 were routinely having number ones selling 300,000 and up, and now we've got songs the number one selling usually around 150 to 170,000, and it doesn't even take 100,000 spins to reach the top 10 these days. And I guess you can say, well, thanks streaming, because since 2010, streaming has really cemented its place in the music industry. Back then, it was a very fringe thing. It was cutting edge, and to some people, it was something that might never break through, but it has, and it's really played a big role, if not the biggest role, in declining music sales.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it's interesting to look back at those figures like from 5 years ago. Like, I actually have the top 10 digital songs from last year around this time, and the number one song was selling 280,000 copies. That was "Love the Way You Lie" by Eminem featuring Rihanna, and now the number one song from last week on the digital songs chart was "Cheerleader" with 170, which I mean comparatively now that's not bad, but it's like wow, look at these changes. We are definitely seeing the impact of streaming, whether it be YouTube streams or on demand streams that are taking over these digital downloads because all it takes is a click of a finger to go, oh, this song is on Spotify. Let me go and listen to it. Bam! I don't have to buy the song if I have a subscription. So yeah,
I mean, actually,
it's just powerful to see that how streaming has taken a blow or has taken has gone head on with sales. I mean, sales aren't completely dead yet, but it's definitely on the decline.
and I think it's really fascinating to see the promotional campaigns for these songs focus less and less on buying it on iTunes and more on crafting these viral videos and interactive marketing campaigns. And it's really interesting to see a lot of Twitter promotion now. And I don't think you saw that back in 2010. It was a lot of, putting posters up on the street and telling people to buy it on iTunes. They had street teams.
Yeah, yeah, and they don't really exist to the power that they used to, back in the day. But it's like, yeah, you're right. It's all about promotion as well.
And I think now shifting over to the general trends in pop music since 2010, I think we've seen alternative crossovers remain a mainstay since then. We've seen plenty of them every year. We've seen more urban, especially lately, in terms of the viral hits like "Hot Boy" or "Watch Me" or "Nasty Freestyle." But I think we've seen less of the dance pop candy and maybe a little more of the house music, deep house trend, especially worldwide. In the U.S., maybe a little uptick in that, especially worldwide.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like you touched on what I wanted to actually talk about is when you look at like an example for the top 10 of the Hot 100 5 years ago, it was mostly pop. Like you had Katy, Eminem, B.O.B. featuring Haley Williams. You had Travis McCoy, Bruno Mars, Mike Posner. Like pretty much pop dominated. Now you have a diverse mix of everything, like less pop, but also the trends of alternative pop and then urban crossovers. Like you have I guess a more of a mix of that, and then I think that probably can be attributed to the fact that streaming is playing a part in the Hot 100 now. Because back then it was all radio airplay and sales. Now it's radio airplay, sales, and streaming. So now you have these additional platforms for promotion where people go on Vine, they listen to a song. Oh, bam! I want to purchase this song because I've never heard it on radio before. So yeah, it's an interesting mix of what's happening between 5 years ago versus now.
Yeah, and streaming and urban have really gone together well. Urban songs tend to do very well in streaming compared to their pop counterparts, trap songs and rap songs. And it's cool to see how in 2010, even the rap songs that were doing well, as I take a look at the pop radio chart from 5 years ago on this date, you see even the raps that are in there are pop. They're pop raps. Number one, California Girls with Snoop Dogg. Number two, Airplanes. Number three, Love the Way You Lie. Number four, Billionaire. That top four, they all have rap, but it's all pop. There's no kind of there's less of this urban, more hardcore rap um, that you'd see in a viral hit today, like Nasty Freestyle, and more of this pop rap sound that went over well with listeners 5 years ago.
Exactly. Yep. You hit the nail right on the head.
And now we're going to transition to our next segment, which we're going to name our most surprising hits and flops of the year. So, sorry, no, you can go.
Okay. Now, I would say honestly the most surprising to me. I'm just gonna go with the obvious and say, um, Fetty Wap and The Weeknd. It's like, I mean, it's kind of piggybacking off of what we were just talking about. Is 5 years ago, you would never see these songs in the top 10. Like, you would never see a Trap Queen in the top 10. You would never see a My Way in the top 10, unless you were Lil Wayne. Because Lil Wayne, he had so much digital power back then. Like, his songs would shoot to the top of iTunes and sell bucket loads a week. So, with the exception of Lil Wayne, you would never see a lot of hardcore rap or a lot of just any type of rap. I guess pure rap in the top 10 back then. So to me, he's been the most surprising. So I would say Trap Queen was the most surprising hit of the year to me. I mean, I know there's more, but definitely him. And then with Earned It, I would say that was more of a surprise to me at pop radio because of its left field nature, not necessarily because it was, experimental, I don't think, but to me, I believe Earned It was more of a slower type, I guess, R&B ballad, if you will, and it did so well on pop radio. Now, I asked myself, did it piggyback off the success of Love Me Like You Do, since they were both soundtracks from the 50 Shades of Grey? But they kind of, were hits on their own right. Like Love Me Like You Do was its own hit, and Earned It was its own hit. But to me, I would say Earned It was the most surprising pop hit of the year for me, because I believe it actually went
Yeah,
number one.
yeah, it did. It went number one. Earned It going number one on pop radio is a big surprise for me. And a few songs that I chose as my surprise hits of the year, I chose "Where Are You Now" by Skrillex and Diplo featuring Justin Bieber. I was surprised when I saw it ascending the iTunes and Spotify charts. I hadn't even heard that he was working with them, actually, before I heard of that song. And the fact it's gotten to, I think, or 11 or 12 on the Hot 100, that's surprising to me because I don't think it's extremely radio friendly. I don't think it's been pushed very hard by the label. And Skrillex has not had a hit, really. So I think that was a surprising hit to me.
Yeah, and in fact, I think it actually went top 10 on the Hot 100 following the video release. I think it peaked at like 9 or 8, so it is a top
Yeah,
10
well,
hit.
for 1 week.
Yeah. To me, it was surprising, but it wasn't, because I think with the whole trend with Lean On being a hit, and you like it being a hit, I kind of felt like at least okay. I think this song will also be a hit. But when it went top 10, I didn't think it was going to go top 10, because I know they kept delaying the video, and the video just came out about 3 weeks ago. So I was lucky. It was lucky that it actually, was able to scrape top 10. But a lot of people mentioned also that some people were probably turned off from buying the song because Justin Bieber was in it. So people, have the whole hate thing for Justin Bieber. So they were probably saying, no, I'm not going to support this, blah, blah, blah. So some people actually thought it could have been bigger than what it was if Justin Bieber wasn't attached to it. But I guess that's for another time, another day.
Another one of the hits that I found surprising this year, and more specifically this winter, was "Jealous" by Nick Jonas. That came out of nowhere for me. Nick Jonas, honestly, I didn't think was going to score a hit, and he did. He scored a big hit with "Jealous." I think number two or number one on pop radio. And he achieved it with the style sound, the "Do What You Want" sound, the "Love Me Harder" sound. And he was able to craft a friendly pop song. It wasn't too generic, and it wasn't too complicated, and he was able to strike pop radio gold on that.
Yep, it was a huge hit for him, and I remember watching it grow. I remember, when the whole Nick Jonas magazine ad came out, and I remember the song being discounted on iTunes, and it started to shoot up. I said, "Wow, seems like it's going to be a hit." And the discount was removed, and the sales were still stable. So I said, "Wow, he really has a hit here." And then pop radio jumped right on it, and I believe Rhythmic got on it late. Rhythmic is normally late with these pop songs, depending on who you are.
Yes.
And it didn't really shock me, but I guess in the beginning, I was more surprised that the general public was actually supporting Nick Jonas as a solo artist rather than supporting him as the Jonas Brothers. Because I know the Jonas Brothers had some success at pop radio, but I don't think they were as successful as Jealous was. I think Jealous was the biggest hit of all of the Jonas songs on pop radio. So congratulations to him for that. And then also, Chains was a follow up hit. It wasn't as big as Jealous, but yeah, it was quite a song for him.
Yeah, and I mean, "Jealous" did cross over. 1 on pop, 4 on rhythmic, 9 on HAC. So good job there. And the last song that I'd like to point out, in terms of, I'm not really surprised that it was a hit, because this band cranks out hits like it's no tomorrow, but I was surprised at how big it was compared to the other two singles, and I'm talking about "Sugar" by Maroon 5, which was much bigger than Maps, much bigger than Animals, spending a host of weeks at number 2. It sold very well for a Maroon 5 song. It streamed very well. It obviously had a ton of radio play, 1 on pop, 1 on HAC, and it really was their biggest hit since "One More Night."
Yeah, it was, and I like to poke fun at this song because we all have the running joke on ATRL that they copy birthday sound and video for the song, and that's what made it successful. But I'm just gonna be real. It was radio candy. It's Maroon 5. Dr. Luke is behind it, and I believe Adam Levine wrote some of the verses as well. But I mean, it's radio candy, and I think everything just synced together at a perfect timing. And what was more impressive to me, piggybacking off what you were saying, I think the most impressive thing to me is that one, it debuted in the top 10. Now that's unheard of for a single that has already been released after the album has come out. Because normally, post-album singles usually climb their way up to the charts because they're already available on iTunes to buy and everything. But that song actually debuted in the top 10 at number 8, and it stayed there for 21 weeks, which was very close to some record, I believe, that Nicki Minaj holds for the longest consecutive stay after debuting in the top 10, which was 21 weeks. So I think it fell shy. But yeah, it was surprising to me that song was bigger than Animals and Maps. And personally, I thought Animals should have been as big as Sugar, because that's my favorite track from Five, from their album. But I guess we'll have to see how this next single does, Feelings, which I guess we'll talk about soon.
And I know I harp on "It Was Always You," but damn, that should have been released. I really think that it would have done so well, and I honestly think it won't now, because I think "Feelings" will be the last single. But I guess Sugar's success made up for it a little bit, but I just really wanted that to be released, so I'm going to get that in there. And now we move to our most surprising flops of the year. And the first one that I'm going to nominate is Pitbull's "Fun," which started to freefall on radio. Honestly thought this was going to be the second coming of "International Love." Instead, it falls down. It falls down on pop radio. It falls down on rhythmic. It's not doing well on sales. Not streaming well. Just in general, not clicking with the general public, which I find surprising for a Pitbull song. And he really hasn't had um, like a huge hit since Timber. I mean, Time of Our Lives was a decent sized hit. It went top 10. It did fairly well, but he has not had a big hit since Timber.
Right. Yeah, that kind of surprised me as well because we again Pitbull is radio candy. But there are some times with Pitbull, he has his hits, he has his smashes, and he has his not so hits. I guess it's mediocre top 40 hits, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
So, but again, Chris Brown is on the track, so I thought that would spark some interest in the song. But no, I guess people are not feeling it as much as I thought they would. Um, but I guess this is just one of the misfires for Pitbull, and I'm not sure if he's moving on to another single, which I probably think I'm pretty sure he will at this point. Um, but yeah, I kind of found that a bit shocking as well. Um, for me, I'm gonna go back just a little bit, maybe slightly back, maybe to earlier this year, maybe which trails into a bit part of the later of last year. I'm very surprised at Charlie XCX. Um, she after the huge success of Fancy, which she was featured on, and then Boom Clap, which were both number one hits at pop radio. Her follow up singles just just they were dead on arrival, like Break the Rules and then Doing It, which actually came out earlier this year featuring Rita Ora. They all just completely didn't do anything, and I was like, wow, for someone who had two huge hits after a very successful run at pop radio, you would think that the third hit or the third single would be, somewhat of a hit, but no, it was a complete misfire. So I just wonder what went wrong with Charlie XCX and her label. I don't know.
I feel like Break the Rules. I feel like the pop radio programmers probably found it a little bit too maybe obnoxious and contrived for that format. I'm not sure whether it would have sold well had it been promoted the way that Boom Clap was, because Boom Clap was tied to The Fault in Our Stars, which was a huge movie. I think that Break the Rules definitely had the potential to go top 40 had it been promoted. I think it would have sold well. Um, and I think it would have gotten, decent. I think it probably would have lagged in airplay, to be honest. But I think that it had the chance, and did it even make it onto the Hot 100 for more than like 2 weeks? I don't know.
I don't think so.
But and I think that, I mean, doing it actually, I was not as surprised. Rita Ora has had one hit, and she was featured, and it was Black Widow. Um, and I can't see her ever breaking out, really, at least here in the U.S. And I think after Break the Rules completely killed the era, I wasn't surprised at all. Because when you release a single after you've killed the era, then it tends to not work. So I think advice to all you singers out there: if you've killed an era, don't release another single. The era is dead. All right. So that's something that Charlie XCX needs to take note on for our next era. And as we transition to our next segment, which is wasted crossovers, we might have a few more singers lamenting that they missed out on hits with some of these songs. And we're going to talk about songs that we think were lined up really well to cross over to pop and become mainstream hits, and instead did not or did not get were not given the chance to.
Right. You can go ahead.
All right, so I have a few. In fact, I have more than a few, but I'll only cover the ones that I think are, were pretty obvious. First one I have to go with. We talked about it before on ATRL. Is Sam Hunt's "Take Your Time," big country hit, still climbing on HAC at number 20 at the moment. Um, it's got a very laid back vibe, very inoffensive, kind of a sweet love song, and was not promoted to pop whatsoever.
That's yeah, and it's funny because that song was climbing on pop and it just faltered. And the funny thing is the call out scores were like at the top. So that means people liked hearing it on pop radio. It's just the fact that again, the label didn't promote it, and it's odd to me because Sam Hunt is signed to Capitol Records, and normally Capitol Records, they're usually on point with their artists, and it was frustrating to me that that song did not live up to its full potential at pop radio because I actually like that song. But maybe I don't know. Maybe they've taken note of that and they're gonna try to make House Party a crossover song because it kind of has a country pop feel to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been a really major country to pop crossover since If I Die Young, and not a top 10 on the Hot 100, I don't think, since Need You Now. So that's a long time. Other formats have had plenty of crossovers between then and now. Rhythmic and alternative are having constant crossovers, but country has managed to stay fairly isolated from the mainstream in terms of that it's a big format. It's the second biggest radio format by total spins per week, I think, and it's the number one biggest format by number of stations on the panel. And when I say total spins per week, I'm talking about the spins per week that the songs in the top 30, 40 get. And I think it's really interesting to see all these country hits, these big country hits, Love Me Like You Mean It, or Sangria, or Girl Crush, just go completely unnoticed by the mainstream. And I think all of them had, crossover potential, and I don't think that at this moment country music executives really care about breaking into pop.
Yeah, and the thing with that is some of the country songs that do cross over to pop, some of them either they cross over on their own, which is very very rare, or they are solicited with the remix, such as "Cruise" by Florida. I'm sorry, wow, Florida Georgia Line and Nelly, which crossed
Oh yeah,
over.
that went top 10.
Yeah,
That went top 10.
and then there was another song that was remixed. I believe "If I Die Young" was remixed. It was given like some random dance remix, which was a complete different version from the flawless version that they recorded in the studio. Um, but yeah, it's interesting that nowadays country and pop are just. I guess there's no connect. I mean, with Taylor Swift, she didn't really have a problem with crossing over because her country music was perfect for pop radio, like Love Story, You Belong with Me. Those are instant crossovers. But now that there's not much of many of the artists that want to crossover because maybe their labels aren't making the push or they're not giving a remix to pop radio. So I guess that has to do with it.
And yeah, now moving over to rhythmic crossovers, and this song was a hit. Top 20 on the Hot 100. Huge on rhythmic and urban. Absolutely, the production was right up radio's alley. Post to be Omarion, Chris Brown, Janae Aiko. Um, if honestly, I believe that if this song had had a proper push to pop radio around the same time it was pushed to rhythmic, it had maybe one, two performances. I honestly think this could have been a top 10 hit on the Hot 100, and instead, its legacy is, quote, one of those urban songs that peaked in the top 20.
Yeah, it's sad. I always frown when I see that happening, and it to me, I don't understand why the label always wait to send it to pop once it finishes at its core formats. Like, why don't you send the song to all formats simultaneously? Like with Happy, that song went to all formats at the same time. Blurred Lines with the all formats at the same time. See You Again, all formats at the same time. And then that way you have the maximum airplay peak that you can get. But once you wait to send it to pop, or once it goes to pop radio, it's like, yeah, it doesn't happen because the airplay doesn't sync up on each of the formats. Like with Trap Queen peaking at, I think it went top 10 on overall radio, but again, it was number one on urban, number one on rhythmic, but then it was like in the 30s on pop radio. You see what I'm saying? So it's just one of those instances where the airplay doesn't align all the way, because with that song, as you said, if it had the proper push and if the airplay was all the same across all formats, yes, it definitely would have been a top 10 hit, because I believe it peaked at 13 or somewhere, or 13 or 14 on the Hot 100. So absolutely, absolutely. Um,
And and Neo got especially slighted this year with these types of hits. Both She Knows and I Don't Mind missed the top 10 on the Hot 100. Did really well on rhythmic and urban. Never got that push to pop radio. So sorry, Neo. Your label is he signed to Capitol too? They're doing something wrong.
I don't know what he signed to. Honestly, I've lost track of him, but I don't think he signed to Capitol Records.
Yeah, I don't know. Let me just, you know what? I need to look this up because whatever his label is doing, um, they're doing it wrong. Because those could have both been hits as well. And he lucked. I honestly, I'm gonna say this that he lucked out with "Time of Our Lives," going to the top 10 on the Hot 100 because it could have just as easily pulled a fun, to be completely honest. And it went top 10. And he's on Motown Records. So yeah, sorry, Neo. Um, poor, poor performance from your label. So anyways, now we're gonna move on to talk about one hit wonders. This year's had a lot of them. Last year had a lot of them. And there have been a lot of smash hits coming from people who've had their breakout hit. Will they be one hit wonders? How did they get their hits? Why have they become hits? We'll start with Omi.
Omi, okay, as much as I despise Cheerleader, I'm just gonna be honest and say I don't think he's going to be a one hit wonder because there's some talks of him doing recordings with Megan Trainor, and as we've seen, Megan Trainor has been a hit maker this year. So maybe the next single will be the Megan Trainor single. We don't know. But I don't think he's going to have anything as big as Cheerleader this soon. But right now, I'm going to say no. He won't be a one-hit wonder. I think he'll have another follow-up hit.
I mean, I think he's got potential to have another hit, especially when he's working with someone like Megan. I think the reggae sound has been more embraced by pop radio. If he chooses to go that route, which I think he is, Megan. With Magic having Rude Smash last year, and I wish they had more hits, but they didn't. I think that he definitely has a chance to have more than one hit, although, if he doesn't have more than one hit, he's literally the textbook example of a one-hit wonder. He's, a reggae singer from Jamaica, had, no knowledge of him in the U.S. pretty much prior to this, only gained recognition from a 2 years late house remix. Very textbook one-hit wonder if he ends up that way.
Right. Absolutely.
And the next person we'll talk about is Rachel Platten, achieving success for the first time with Fight Song, which started on HAC, crossed over easily to pop, made an impact on the mainstream, was featured in television commercials, and has generally been received well by the general public.
Rachel Platten. I'm going to say no as well. The reason I say no is because she's your textbook definition of a single songwriter, and she will cater so much to the adult pop crowd, like your modern day Sarah Bareilles or Kobe. I can never pronounce her last name.
Colby Calais?
Yes, yes. I think she would do well at that format. So because of that, I don't think she'll be a one hit wonder. So she'll get score some other smaller stream hits, but I don't think Fight Song is going to be the last of her.
Yeah, and I think she can be, like you said, getting Sarah Bareilles or having Sarah Bareilles sized hits in terms of their performance on HSC and on the Hot 100. I agree that she won't have another big mainstream hit. Go ahead and prove me wrong if you'd like to, Rachel. But I think that she'll remain confined to HAC and AC after Fight Song finishes. Anyways, next person that we're going to talk about, already touched on his song. We talked about viral hits. Silento. 17 years old, 18 years old. I can't remember. It's one of those. Young rapper from Georgia. Struck gold, really, with Watch Me in terms of its virality and its appeal, mass appeal. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't have another hit.
Yeah, it's one of those things where this song is kind of a gimmick. It's a dance song, a dance craze. So we've seen what happened in the past when people have these dance type songs and they just kind of fade to the background. Now, I would not be surprised if he takes the Soldier Boy route. It's very funny because Crank That was actually getting its start the same time 8 years ago in 2007. Like Crank That was kind of going viral in the summer, and then in September it just blew up. And it just went number one for I think 4 or 5 weeks on the Hot 100. And then he had a follow up hit after that, but it went nowhere near the top 10. I believe it was a top 30 hit. So, and both of these, I think Salento, like you said, is from Atlanta. Soldier Boy is from Atlanta. I can't help but to see the parallels. I think he may follow a Soldier Boy route, have a huge smash with Watch Me, and then have a lot of, you know, medium sized hits like in the 20-30 ranges, and then kind of just fades to the background unless, you know, he changes his sound. But, you know, with these type of hits, it's you kind of already have to box them in that one hit wonder or that non longevity box, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But a side note here is that I thought that Fetty Wap could be a big one-hit wonder candidate too, and look where that's gone in the span of like a month. So who knows? We could be proven wrong easily. A song can go viral very quickly, and if Silento can find a way to do that, or if he can just find a way to get a more traditional hip hop hit, you know, more power to him. I think everybody that we're talking about has at least some potential to achieve another hit, even if it's not mainstream. I don't think there's a Daniel Powder here. I think that, you know, Omi, Rachel Platt, and Silento all have a chance for future hits, and so does the next artist that we're going to talk about, rather band, Walk the Moon, alternative crossovers this in early 2015.
Oh man, Walk the Moon. I'm gonna say yes, unfortunately. Um, Again, like we talked about a couple weeks ago when we did our first podcast, Walk the Moon's "Shut Up and Dance" was very of a surprise hit to me. Well, not as surprising as Trap Queen, but it was a surprise hit to me because I really didn't expect that song to cross over as much as it did, and I think they will remain one hit wonders for the time being because I think they're one of those bands who are probably complacent with just having one big hit and just making money off of it. To be honest,
Yeah.
and I think I was watching one of their interviews on like VH1 online or something like that, and they asked the lead singer, "So what's your next? You know, what's your next move?" As Shut Up and Dance, and then they basically said, "Well, we're just gonna go on tour." And see the fans, and then just kind of chill back for the next year or so. Well, you know, when you're chilling, quote unquote, you know, the GP is really not going to keep a huge interest in you. You need to be in the face. Like Imagine Dragons, they were releasing single after single, and they did not stay one hit wonders because they had multiple singles and were in everyone's face. But when you're a new band, such as Walk the Moon, or being a new band exposed to the GP for the first time, really, you kind of really have to be proactive and promote and everything. So I'm gonna say yes, one hit wonders to Walk the Moon.
I definitely agree. I think they're going the same path as Bastille and Foster the People and American Authors. And the thing is that these bands all tend to have more than one alternative hit. They have plenty of them. Bastille had some alternative hits before Pompeii and after. The same thing goes with Foster the People. The same thing goes with American Authors. Now, the thing is that because alternative is a much smaller market than HAC or Rhythmic, these songs don't seep into the mainstream the way that Rachel Platten's future songs or Silento's future songs might. Alternative is smaller, so they'll remain fairly isolated from the mainstream. And Walk the Moon will, I think, become one-hit wonders in most of our minds. Now, moving on to the next artist, talked about them earlier, Major Lazer. Will they have another hit?
Major Lazer will have another hit, and if they continue to capitalize off of Lean On and I'm sorry, was the other song that they just had? I can't think of the name of it. Crap.
Powerful with Ellie Goulding.
Yeah, I believe that's the next single, or it's coming soon. I don't think honestly, I don't think they're going to be a one hit wonder. I think if they continue to capitalize off of what's going on right now with Lean On, they can have another hit. I don't see them completely fading out to the background.
And our last artist that we're going to talk about, and actually we had a lot of requests for her to be covered, is Natalie LaRose, who had her hit with Somebody, Top 10, featuring Jeremiah. Um, and her next single, she's already put it out, features Fetty Wap on it. It's rising. It's rising slowly on pop, rising slowly on rhythmic. But the music video views are not looking good whatsoever.
Um, Natalie Rose. I'm gonna say no. She would not be a one hit wonder. I think what she's doing right now, she's trying to stay relevant, and that's great. She didn't come out with somebody and then just completely leave the scene. At least she's out there, on radio with some type of airplay and with some type of sales. So I think with that being said, I don't think she's going to completely fade away and the people will forget about her. But I think her next single needs to be some type of a decent hit in order for her to, I guess, break out that stereotypical definition of one hit wonder. Because right now, all we know her for is somebody. But I don't think she'll remain a one hit wonder, to be honest.
Now, talking about basically the opposite of a one-hit wonder, back to Taylor Swift in 1989. We're going to talk about the potential fifth single, choices, and how it might perform. And I say, why not? Definitely release a fifth single. And I think at this point that New Romantics is the best choice, and it's doing very well on iTunes for what it is. It's not on the album, except for on the deluxe. It's not on the regular album. It's inside the top 150, I think. And I think it's been generally well received by Taylor's fan base.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. That was actually on one of my touch points. New Romantics logically seems like the best choice for the fifth single. It has the most potential to be a great seller because, as we mentioned, it's only available to purchase on iTunes at the moment, or if you buy the deluxe edition from Target. And I believe in the first. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say when she first put it on iTunes, I believe it sold somewhere between 80 and 90,000 copies in the first week, which was pretty good because considering the people who bought it from Target and the people who didn't already have it, I think that was a great number and a great indicator that hey, this should be the next single. Now that Bad Blood is pretty much done and it's peaked. I think her label was probably testing the waters to see, okay, what she would put out next. And I believe the next huge platform for her would be, hey, the VMAs, which we all know about through Nikki Taylor and Katy Perry. But I think that would be a great opportunity to premiere New Romantics. And hey, why not? She can get a fourth number one from the album that way.
Now, here's my question. Since New Romantics isn't included on the standard edition of 1989, will it sell the album? Or will the album, begin to decline, as we all have predicted it would for months, and New Romantics will kind of not be tied to the album in the sense that it's not selling the album the way that Bad Blood has?
That's a good question. If anything, I mean, if there are people who really, really want the album, and then they can just, go to Target and buy it. But what Taylor has done in the past is she's re-released her albums, like I guess called it Platinum Edition, because I know she did that with either Fearless or Speak Now, which is basically a re-edition of the album's standard tracks plus the deluxe tracks. So that's a possibility that she can do within the next couple months. It's just, hey, let's reissue this album, let's put New Romantics on it, so if people want to buy the album, bam, they can. And that's a smart marketing move. I haven't heard any plans. I haven't seen any of the Swifties or any of the other ATRL members talk about it. So, but that's definitely a possibility. So I think, honestly, her album is going to stay in the top 10 for a very long time. I don't see it leaving anytime soon. I mean, if it's still in the top 10 now, like in the top 5, and Bad Blood is pretty much peaked, this album has some legs, really.
Yeah, it's done so well. Like I said before, it's really clicked with the public. Everything she's doing is lining her up perfectly to just continue to have amazing longevity in the Billboard, both the Billboard Hot 100 and the Billboard 200. So now it's time for our feature. We're gonna make this a regular feature. We did it last podcast. I think it went really well. Will it go top 10? We take 5 or 7 songs that are rising. We talk about them. Talk about whether they'll go top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 or not. And so the first song out of this podcast's batch is "Locked Away" by Our City featuring Adam Levine. Has risen really well on iTunes. A few weeks ago, it was out of the top 100s, now in the 30s and 40s. Buzzed about a lot in the iTunes thread. It's got that pop hook from Adam Levine. Will it go top 10?
Yeah, I took a sneak peek at it or sneak listen at it on Apple Music. I think it was gonna go top 10. It's perfect radio candy, perfect Adam Levine. I mean, in the very least, it could pull a Stereo Hearts, which actually did very well. It was Travis McCoy featuring, or was it Gym Class Heroes featuring Adam Levine? Um, and they seem to like Adam Levine's voice. Like he just has that buttery voice for pop radio, I guess. But yes, I think it's going to be a top 10 hit. Chances maybe 70 to 80%. And as you pointed out, the sales are a good indicator that this is going to be a good hit. I think it's selling very, very well compared to its pop airplay or its airplay in general. So yeah, it has all of the writings to be a top 10 hit.
And I'm definitely going to say yes on this. I think it's going to be a nice hit for Adam Levine. After the flop of "This Summer's Gonna Hurt," like a mother, mother effer. "Locked Away" is rising really well on pop radio. It's been on for 19 days, and it's ascended if you're counting recurrence, it's ascended from out of the chart to number 36, 19 days. It's got a nice bullet of 1,000, around 997 to be exact. And it's made for pop radio. It's got that pop chorus. Our City is not an offensive act, just like Gym Class Heroes was not an offensive act. It's suited for the mainstream. Will span. Hopefully, their hope is that it will transcend generations. I don't know if you should aspire to be a huge hit, but I think it'll be a nice rebound for Adam Levine. And anyways, our next song that we're going to talk about is Jason Derulo's "Cheyenne," which has had some questionable iTunes updates lately, and is not proving to be a streaming beast, but I think it still has, a minor chance to go top 10 if it can be played on the radio like "Want to Want Me." It is rising on radio. It had a plus 161 on pop today, so healthy there. I'd put the chances of Cheyenne going top 10 right now around 20-30%, but I think if he can get it some steam, if Derulo can promote it some, get it the exposure that "Want to Want Me" had, then I think it has a chance.
Yeah, your chances literally were the same as mine. I said 20 to 30. So great psychic powers you have. Yeah, right now it's not looking so promising because it's still in the hundreds in iTunes with the video being out for almost about 3 weeks to a month now. So it's not looking good in that department, but it is rising on radio, and we all know Jason Derulo is a pop radio staple at this point, especially this decade with the massive and numerous amount of hits he's had. So I'm not really worried about radio not playing the song. But if the public is not interested right now, I'm trying to figure out what's going to make the public interested. Is it going to be some type of high profile performance? Because the video is very, very good. It's probably one of his best videos to date. So if he can get some type of high profile performance, maybe, I don't know, at one of these talent shows or the VMAs, which I don't think he's ever performed there, I think it could be a hit. Top 10 right now, I'm not seeing it. I'm maybe somewhere in the top 30, but top 10 is quite of a stretch right now.
Yeah, I could see it definitely pulling. Wait, hold on. I don't think did the other side go top 10? Because I could see it pulling of the other side if the other side didn't go top 10.
It actually,
let me just.
It went top.
Did it?
It went top 20. I think it peaked at 18 or 17, but it was a huge pop radio hit. I think it went top 5 on pop radio.
Yeah, so I think Cheyenne could do that. I think that's what it's looking like at the moment. Best case scenario, low end top 10 for a few weeks. Worst case scenario, stalls on pop radio, it misses the top 30. Anyways, Cheyenne is in flux at the moment, so we'll see how Derulo does with it. And the next song that I think is a curious case is Calvin Harris and Disciples, How Deep Is Your Love, which is much more house influenced than some of his other songs, but has a nice big bullet on pop radio. Calvin Harris, just like Jason Derulo, is a pop radio staple, but will it go top 10?
Top 10. I'm gonna say right now. I'm gonna say yes. Just because this is, I guess this is a lead single for an album that's coming up. So I think with that he may have, I guess, juicier sales with the downloads, and he is a streaming monster in his ways. Like I know his last videos or most of his videos are always over 100 million views, and then he's pretty much one of the biggest streamers on Spotify. So with those combined, I think he has a slight chance. And then pop radio, let's just go ahead and say it now. Pop radio is going to carry this all the way, probably to the top five. So again, with Jason Derulo, I'm not worried about Calvin Harris not receiving pop radio airplay. Both Calvin Harris, the video isn't out yet, and he hasn't really pushed the song other than releasing it to iTunes. So I think right now he has more chances than Jason Derulo. So I'm going to say about 60 to 70% chance of yes.
All right, well, you're a bit more optimistic than I am. I mean, I took a look at the last two singles he's put out, Blame and Outside. Both didn't really threaten to crack the top 10, at least in the US. They were more global when it came to streaming and video views. But again, those were singles for Motion, which was an album that the lead single, Summer, went top 10. So I think definitely you could see, I mean, I can see How Deep Is Your Love being a top 10 hit in the vein of Summer. But then again, I can also see it pulling, not in terms of the actual song, because it's nothing like it, but Feel So Close in terms of, missing the top 10 by a little bit, still being nice and big on pop radio, streaming well. The sales are the issue for Calvin Harris. His last two singles, I don't think they've been in the iTunes top 20 or 30 for very long. He's got to work on getting people to buy his songs and not just hear them on the radio and then forget about them a few hours later. I think How Deep Is Your Love is a good song. It's just as good as Blame It Outside. So I think that given the right promotion and given a little bit of lead single sales, he could do it. But I'll put the chances at 40-60 right now. I think it's a 40% chance that it goes top 10 at the moment. I'm a little bit skeptical. But he could do it. I really think he could.
Yeah, it's kind of up in the air right now. So yeah, you're right.
The next song that we're going to talk about in Will It Go Top 10 is a song that I think is absolutely horrible. It is horrible. It is one of the worst songs of the year in my opinion, but it exists, and it is That's How You Know by Nico and Vince featuring Kid Ink and BB Rexa.
Oh my god. I heard that song and I'm like, is this a rip off of 4 or 5 seconds? I don't get it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm iffy about this song. I mean, I listened to it and it did okay on iTunes when it first came out, and I don't know if it's still in the top 100, but it was like in the 60s.
It's not.
Okay, so it fell out. Okay, well, I don't know. I'm not seeing this as a top 10 hit right now. I mean, I'm leaning more towards no, but I'm kind of on the fence of no and yes, so I have my chances at 40 to 50%. Reason being is because their last single wasn't really a big hit. I mean, it was a pop radio moderate hit, but then it kind of completely flopped in sales and streams. I think they kind of waited too late to kind of make a comeback, or they were not as persistent, like we were talking about earlier, with acts such as like Walk the Moon. It just came with this hit, and now they're about to take a huge break. Nico and Vince, they tried to put out a second single, it didn't do well, and now they're back a year later. So I don't know. The things are not really aligning for me to say yes, because they don't have a video yet. I haven't seen any type of promotion schedule, so I'm gonna say no for now. I mean, for me, it's too early to tell, but I'm leaning on the side of no, just because it's kind of in the vein of 4 or 5 seconds, and I don't know if pop radio is ready to have that type of sound again. Because the only reason they pushed 4 or 5 seconds is because of who was on it, Rihanna. It was a lead single. They pushed it as far as they could, and then as soon as it peaked, it dropped like a rock. So I don't know about this song.
Yeah, I'm biased, but I'm definitely going to say no. I think it's a very low, maybe a 10% chance of going top 10. I agree that Nico and Vince waited way too long. However, they did follow my advice of if you kill the era, you kill the era, and you don't release another single. But I think coming out with another single a year after, more than a year after they first broke out, a little bit excessive. I think they should have done what Magic did and release a song in the winter, which Magic did with No Way No. Still flopped, but it's a better try. And instead, they come out with this watered down 4 or 5 seconds. I definitely see that comparison. They come out with a watered down 4 or 5 seconds. I think that sales was honestly a flash in the pan. I have a hard time believing it'll get into the top 50 on iTunes, top 40 on iTunes. I have a feeling it won't stream well because of the fact that Nico and Vince are still fairly unknown. If you ask someone on the street who Nico and Vince was, chances are they wouldn't know. And I think that they'd be lucky to see this go recurrent on the Hot 100. That's just my prediction. I don't think it will be a big hit at all. But I think we should. It was good to cover it. I think a lot of people have been curious about it. It's a very strange collaboration. It's almost as strange as that new one with Rixton and Janae Aiko. But I don't think I can see it becoming a big mainstream overall hit. Anyways, as we move to our next song, we already talked about Adam Levine. Let's talk about his band and Feelings, the next single from Five. Will it go top 10?
I'm gonna say yes. Just putting it out there. I mean, they just really only had one misfire with This Summer's Gonna Hurt. Um, but for this one, I'm gonna say yes. I think they're gonna get back in their groove. Everything is gonna fall back together with radio, and I think the video maybe is gonna help. They're gonna it's gonna help sales this time because their last video, This Summer's Gonna Hurt, was a poor streamer, and I believe that had to do with the fact that it was flagged on YouTube, so you can only watch it if you were logged in or over the age of 18. But Feelings, I think yes, they're gonna bounce back and get another top 10 hit. I mean, it's Maroon 5, it's their radio candy, can't really deny them. I say yes. Chances are, I didn't really give it a chance because everything is kind of very, very early in stages. So if I had to guess, I would say 70% right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yes. And radio always supports them no matter what. This Summer's Gonna Hurt went top 10 on pop radio, extended their streak of pop radio top 10s to 9, and Feelings will push it into the double digits, I'm sure of it. I think that, obviously, you have to worry about sales. You have to worry about it having worse sales than Maps and Animals if it's not going to go top 10. Because it can have map sales, it can have animal sales, which I think barely cross 2 million. And you can go top 10 if you have the really big load of radio support that Maroon 5 has. So I think Feelings will go top 10. I'll give it an 80% chance. I'm confident. It's catchy because of course it is. It's got a great chance to become a big hit for them late summer and fall, and really put a nice finishing touch on what's been a very nice era for them that makes it 2 consecutive eras in a row that have had some big mainstream singles, kept them in the public eye. Exactly what you want to do if you're Maroon 5.
Exactly.
And the final song that we're going to do in Will It Go Top 10 is the badly titled She's Kinda Hot by 5 Seconds of Summer, which went to number 1 upon release, shot up on Spotify and fell down almost as quickly as it came back up, and is now hanging around in the 40s there, and is rising well on pop. I'm not. Does it have a deal on? Do you know if it has a deal on pop radio? Because it's getting plus 300s all over the place there.
Well, it did have. I mean, I'm pretty sure it had a deal on its first day, but then after the first day, what normally happens is it's really up to the radio to decide if they want to play it or not. So if it's still getting those type of healthy updates, that means radio is really feeling it.
Yeah, it's if you look at its update today, It was a plus 225 on published, plus 242 on all stations, so that's very healthy. I think it will become a fairly big pop radio hit. Wouldn't be surprised if it peaked in the 7 to 15 range. But for will it go top 10 on the overall chart, I'm gonna say no. I'll give it around a 20-30% chance. I'm gonna say no because I don't think that the streaming will rebound. It had a few big days on Spotify and that was it. I don't think that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that boy bands have been traditionally big streamers. Rather, they've sold more.
Well, depends because I know One Direction's "Story of My Life" was a pretty decent streamer. Um, yeah, I know one "Story of My Life" was because I was kind of following that chart run. But outside of that, no. I mean, their views are kind of front loaded, if you will, because everyone rushes to watch the first couple days and then they just kind of fall off. But I think with "Story of My Life,"
Right.
that was like a nice crossover hit between adult pop, and even adult contemporary. So I think its streams, by virtue of that, became very uniform.
better.
Right. But I don't know, with 5 Seconds of Summer, I'm just not seeing it, to be honest. I mean, the title is tragic. I'm just not seeing it. It's to me, I don't think it's going to be a top 10 hit. I think personally, it's just going to maybe hover somewhere in the top 20 to 30 range. With pop radio being its main supporter. But looking back on their past singles, I don't think they've been major sellers. I mean, I think they've done okay, like maybe in the top 15 to 25 range on iTunes, but I don't think any of their singles have set up residency within the top 10 on iTunes as a single. So I'm just not saying.
Yeah, they haven't had a big hit yet. And I would be surprised if She's Kinda Hot became one. I think it'll drop really fast once radio drops it. And I think it'll end up being pretty much an afterthought that I won't really think about much by the time 2016 rolls around. And thus, we come to the conclusion of will it go top 10? If you have any songs that you'd like us to talk about in next podcast, will it go top 10? Remember to tweet them to us at Charts Podcast. I run the account. I tweet often. I'll answer your questions there, and I'll take questions there. So a little plug for the Twitter account. And now we move to the story of Alessia Cara, 19-year-old breakout from the suburb of Toronto, performing on Jimmy Fallon tonight. Here's Top 50 on Pop Radio. What do you see for her in the future?
I'm seeing that she will probably be a very light breakout version of Lorde, if you will. I don't see. A lot of people are saying this is going to be the next Royals, and we've been saying that a lot. We've been saying every song is going to be the next Royals and everything, but I'm not right now. I think she's going to break out, but I don't think she's going to break out onto the levels that a lot of people are seeing right now. I think it's going to take some time for her to actually blossom and grow. I mean, her single is doing somewhat well. Like, I believe she's about to enter the top 100 on iTunes in a few minutes or a few, because I've been seeing J-Boy actually, posting about it in the iTunes thread, so I do see that the single is rising, so that is a good sign. But I think Here will be a pretty decent sized hit for her. Top 10, I'm not sure, but overall for her personally, I think, she's going to have a nice breakout era, but maybe not as big as Lorde or Meghan Trainor.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get the Lorde comparisons. She's a teen girl. Her breakout song is fairly anti-stereotypical pop song themes. Self-described alternative pop. Probably gets rhythmic and urban play. Actually, already top 50 on urban. Fairly relatable song. Jimmy Fallon being the first televised performance. That would be tonight. So I get the Lorde comparisons. But no, I can't see it being a 9-week number one. I mean, best case scenario, it goes top 10. Big hit. Cements her status as someone to watch. And, I mean, actually, I was going to say worst case scenario, it pulls an it's already past that. It's already past. It'll be bigger than Octa Hit already. I think with the urban play, and I think Def Jam is doing a good job promoting her. They did a big radio tour across the U.S. recently, the last few weeks, and they've generally done a nice job getting the word out on her. So I think actually the worst case scenario, I think it still probably ends up going top 40 on the Hot 100, and that's a pretty bold prediction considering it hasn't hit the chart yet. But yeah, there's my take on it.
And then that's a good prediction because I mean, based on everything right now, like with the sales and the radio airplay, I mean that's kind of a reasonable prediction. I don't think it's going to completely flop because it seems like they're going to do a nice job with pushing her. I'm just hoping that she doesn't turn out like like Tori Kelly, where they pushed Nobody Love for days and for weeks on end, and it only peaked at number 60 on the Hot 100. But then on the flip side, her album actually did really well in its first week. I think it sold around 70,000 copies or somewhere around that number, which was pretty good considering that she did not have a huge hit to push the album. So hopefully she doesn't fall, like singles wise, hopefully she doesn't fall into that trap where they're, continually pushing her and the song isn't really doing anything. But I think she's already off to a slightly better start than Tori Kelly.
Yeah, she's got an EP out next month. That was just announced today. So things happening quickly. We'll see how that does. I watched an acoustic performance of one of her other songs. I liked it. I mean, I think that there's good potential here. I think Def Jam is not going to waste it. You know what? I think she'll do well. I think she'll do well this year, and perhaps in the years to come. And speaking of Tori Kelly, should have been us also really struggling in the sales department. Barely top 100, in the 80s nowadays. Despite being top 20, it's Nobody Love all over again for her. And I think that Capital's getting a little discouraged now.
Yeah, and someone actually brought this up in the iTunes thread or radio thread a couple of days ago. It's like, they're pushing her, but the public isn't just as receptive right now, and that just kind of makes you think like, well, why do they keep pushing her and the single sales are not really doing much? And I'm not sure how the album is doing itself, but that kind of brings in the question of, well, are they using payola to fuel her songs on radio? Who knows? But yeah, it's just a weird situation. Like, I've never seen it in two situations where Nobody Love and then her next single just completely not connecting with the general public. So I guess we'll just have to wait to see what happens with if there is a third single. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if the third single did any better than the first two. I think this era, although the album sales are good, and just like you, I was surprised by the first week sales. I think I looked on her Twitter. She's got a fan base, so that's not a huge issue. She's got to just, I mean, she's had promo. She's performed. She performed most recently, I think, on the BET Awards. So she's had some pretty big promo slots. I think the issue lies with sales. And maybe as sales become less relevant, which they are, and quickly, maybe she's going to have better chances to get a hit maybe with her next era. But this era, I don't see her having a big, breakout, huge hit single. She's got plenty of time, though. She's still fairly young.
Absolutely. Yeah, I still see big things with her. It's not the end, but it's just, to me, and another thing that's surprising to me, I don't mean to hold up time, but another thing that's surprising me is that Nobody Love was a Max Martin single, and it to me, it sounds like Problem, like it had the whole structure, the build up of the pre-chorus, and then the mellowing out of the chorus. So I thought, if Problem was a hit, maybe this could be just not as big, but at least some type of decent hit. But no, I guess Max Martin can't give a hit to every single body. I don't know.
Yeah. So, anyways, the last thing that we're going to talk about is not directly charts related, but we decided, just like Lucia Cole in the last episode, we're going to cover Taylor, Nikki, and Katie. Yeah, this is a very messy situation. Nikki said some stuff on Twitter that I think was slightly unnecessary, to put it mildly, and Taylor said some stuff on Twitter that was slightly unnecessary, and Katie really didn't have a part in this. And Charlie Puth, he said something like, "Oh, you got to focus on the music and not like talk smack about each other." Okay, this is not what you say when you've just broken out with a 12-week number one. They need you need to get some better PR people over here because everybody's saying all the wrong things about this. This is a big fat mess.
It's a mess. I think it's a mess, and you know, as much as Nicki Minaj, she brought up some good points, but there are some things that you don't say. There's some things you just don't say, and some things it's better to be worked out behind closed doors or just off Twitter. Because as we've seen, some people are just not meant to be on Twitter. Like, for example, Azalea Banks. We know for a fact that she is a ticking time bomb, and she will go after you no matter who you are. She will at you. She's
Very,
a
very good job there with the Tove Lo promo. Excellent, excellent.
exactly. Bought on iTunes. Also, and the thing with Taylor, you know, I don't know if her tweet came up like the whole "I'll bring you on stage" thing. It seemed shady to me. Some people didn't see it, but it was shady. But again, those are things that you just don't get involved, you know. And then I love Katie to death, but again, that was not your time or place. That was not your time or place at all. You have your thing with Taylor. You do your thing with Taylor behind closed doors. Don't make it don't draw attention to yourself. You know, you've not said anything about this whole whatever feud that you guys have going on between Taylor and Katie. If there's something going on, the best thing to do is just not to say anything at all. And I think the best person to have done that in her whole career, honestly, is Beyonce. Like she's been accused of so much from stealing credits to not having a baby to having a surrogate have her baby. Like she's been thrown all this drama and she doesn't say anything. She just shuts up about it. And I think that's what has kept her around for so long is because she doesn't feed into what people are saying about her. And I think people need to take up and take her advice, to be honest.
Yeah, now she's got a husband who doesn't know how to run a streaming service, and she's remained very calm. I think that she'll continue. I mean, for her, I see as many R&B pop hits as she would like. In the future, she can do it. She's got that sound. She's got the full support of the public, massive fan base. Gets the radio play. Can cross over to pop if she needs to. She is fine. She's just chilling. She can chill out. Talking about Nico and Vin's Walk the Moon, they can't chill. She can chill out for a while. Um, and speaking of chilling out for a while, Adele has done that. And I think that, you know, when Adele comes back, whether it's next year or sometime late this year, which personally would surprise me, I think it'll be next year. But when Adele comes back, it'll be interesting to see the public's reception after her being gone for 4 years since her last big hit.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, honestly, on my take on it, she's not gonna have a problem coming back. I mean, we all saw, well, we're witnessing right now, 21 is still charting on the Billboard 200. She is still pulling, I want to say, between 2,000 to 3,000 pure sales per week. That's not including the streams and the downloads. That's just the actual album sales. So she has an album that's selling, and she has not promoted that album since the Grammys the 2012 Grammys when she won 6 awards that night. She honestly she's set for life. I mean, she doesn't have to come back. She's already made her money. But if she does come back, I don't think she's going to have a problem picking up where she left off. I mean, no, I don't think she's going to have a hit as big as Rolling in the Deep, but she's not going to flop. She's not going to pull a Nora Jones. I don't think that's going to happen. Like, I think a lot of people are saying, oh, she may, follow the route of Nora Jones, have one huge error, and then just kind of fade to the background, but I'm not saying that with her. I think she's been away long enough to watch the industry and to watch to see what has happened, what has transpired, what works, what doesn't work, and she's going to play that to her advantage. And I think she's gonna have a successful era. 21 size,
Yeah.
definitely not, but she's
No,
gonna
no.
be
Yeah.
successful. Yeah,
So an interesting story to follow along with Adele, as she may or may not come back this year. But speaking of this year, we have one more segment to do, and we're going to talk about the year-end top 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. Um, Now, when I was writing about this segment when we were planning for the podcast, I thought it would be a little guess the year-end top 5 thing. So I will offer my take. Uptown Funk is the obvious number 1. Number 2 will be interesting to see whether it will be See You Again or Thinking Out Loud. Thinking Out Loud has the advantage in terms of it has the whole year. See You Again, obviously, didn't start collecting chart points until late March, early April, and Thinking Out Loud was collecting them for the whole year. Thinking Out Loud is, in my opinion, is going to be about, I think, the overall airplay points. Thinking Out Loud will probably end up with around the same, if not very slightly more. See You Again will probably actually have fairly good longevity on radio, considering it crossed over to HAC, Rhythmic, Urban AC, and AC. And Thinking Out Loud has just had great longevity in general, not just on the radio, and it's still got 56 million AI. So I think See You Again and Thinking Out Loud will probably end up with roughly the same airplay points. I think Thinking Out Loud will have the upper hand in sales, but who will have the upper hand in streaming, and who will get that number 2 spot on the year end?
yeah. I'm thinking out loud. I mean, I'm actually torn between thinking out loud and seeing you again, but I'm gonna lean towards with thinking out loud because of the fact that, as you said, it's had its whole chart life within the eligibility period, and it's having very, very great longevity outside of the top tens, which is, another thing that we have to keep in mind is like when it leaves the top 10, how long is it going to stay on the chart? And I want to say it's in its 40th week on the Hot 100. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's gonna be thinking about loud. It's gonna edge out See You Again, not by much, but just enough to claim the top 2 spot. And then 3, obviously See You Again because um, it's surprising to me that it's already starting to fall and within the top 10. I thought it was going to have a little bit more longevity within the top 5, but it looks like it's starting to fall um, quicker than I thought it would be. So for that reason, I'm going to say Uptown Funk 1, Thinking Out Loud 2, See You Again number 3.
And then we've got number 4 and number 5. And some candidates for these spots, we've got Sugar, we've got Trap Queen, we've got Bad Blood. Where do you think those fit? Because my personal opinion is this. I think that Trap Queen is going to have those streaming points through the whole year. It's number 2 on streaming songs as I speak. It's having great longevity on Spotify. It's number 4 there. 6 there, I mean. Sorry, 6, 7, 9 is number 4. So I am going to predict that Trap Queen takes the number 4 spot, and the number 5 spot goes to Sugar. Because Sugar has had amazing longevity on overall airplay. It's number 15 there, which is only 1 spot below the massive hit that was Uptown Funk. Sugar is still getting good Vivo views on the official video. And although it's not selling well, what was I going to say? Although it's not selling well, neither is the other big hits from its time, like Earned It, or even, is Thinking Out Loud really that high right now? And let me check. I don't think it's that high. Thinking Out Loud is... oh, I take that back. Yeah, it's number 50. Yeah, it's still selling really well. So that's a sales beast. But Bad Blood has been decreasing pretty fast on iTunes. So I do think that Sugar will get the number 5 over Bad Blood.
Did you? What about like Blank Space? Where did you see that peaking or coming within the top 10?
Yeah, I think that Blank Space makes the top 10. I think it goes like Uptown Funk 1, Thinking Out Loud 2, See You Again 3, Trap Queen 4, Sugar 5, Bad Blood 6. And Taylor could double up. She could get Blank Space 7. I could totally see it happening. Or we could have Take Me to Church could be up there, maybe number 9 or number 10 for Take Me to Church. And then possibly, if it accrues enough chart points, we could see Can't Feel My Face or Cheerleader, but with the fact that Cheerleader I don't think is going to have a tremendous amount of longevity, it could be Can't Feel My Face that sneaks into the top 10.
Right. Yeah, my 4 and 5 are slightly different than yours. I would say, well, Sugar definitely somewhere in the top 5. That's not a that's not up for debate. But I actually thought Blank Space would make it somewhere in the top 5, or at least 4 or 5, because we when you think back to November, December, when it actually started to become a hit, I think all of its chart points got within the eligibility period, which was December 1st, 2014. And remember, it spent 7 weeks at number one, and I think it spent an additional 7 to 9 weeks in the top 10. So, and I know that it outlasted a lot of hits that have come and go since then. And I think it spent about 30, 35 weeks on the Hot 100. I mean, I'm not looking dead at the numbers right now, but I don't know. I just had a hunch that Blank Space may make it in the top 5, but I didn't think that Bad Blood was as big as Blank Space, so that it would actually be in the top
No,
5.
Bad Blood definitely wasn't. Yeah, Bad Blood definitely wasn't as big as Blank Space. I think that Blank Space has a chance. I think that I'd have to see. I think it's still getting good streaming numbers. I'm not sure if the sales are enough. I think it's. I'm pretty sure it's in the 80s, 90s. Where is it? 88 on iTunes, and it's been that way for quite a while now. I think as it went from winter to spring, we saw it go from the 20s to the 40s to the 60s. Now we're here in the 80s. So I'm not sure if the sales will be enough. The streams are not an issue. It's had great longevity on Vivo, and it passed 1 billion views, I think. And it's had it's had some nice longevity there. Still got almost 40 million on airplay. So yeah, I guess I could see Blank Space going top 5, but I'm not sure giving the streaming beast that Trap Queen is.
Right. And then another thing to remember about the Hot 100 year end is that once a song leaves the Hot 100, it no longer collects points. So now that Blank Space
Which is,
is,
by the way, that is bullshit. Continue.
yeah, I don't agree. Yeah, it's kind of a mess, but I think they should accumulate everything. But yeah, once a song leaves the Hot 100, it stops collecting points. So now that Blank Space is off the charts, I think it just fell off either this week or last week. It's no longer eligible to collect points for the year-end chart. So whatever points it has now, that's how many points it's going to have for the year-end chart. But again, we still have another, let's see, August, September, October, November. We still have another 4 months to go. And if we rewind back to last year, All About That Bass broke out really at this time last year, and it placed at number 8 on the year-end Hot 100 last year. So, anything can still happen within the next 4 months with this top 5, top 10 situation. But I think the top 3 are definitely solidified. It's kind of a toss up between 4 or 5 and the rest of the top 10.
All right. Well, that about wraps it up for today's podcast. If you've got any questions that you'd like us to cover in the next podcast, you can post them inside the thread or tweet us at Charts Podcast. I run the account and I'm active there. Make sure to give us a follow there on Twitter. Post your feedback in the thread. We appreciate hearing the support and the feedback. Hopefully it'll be the third time's a charm, and we'll have everybody on the panel, all 4 of us, for episode 3. Hopefully coming within the next 1-2 weeks. And that is about it.
All right. Thank you again for hosting this, Alex, and we will see you for number 3 within the next week or so. Take care.